I serve as an outsourced chief investment officer for pension plans and endowment plans. And in that respect, I am an asset allocator. I determine which assets to invest for a given portfolio depending on what their needs are. And then I identify the specific investments within each asset class to invest in. And over time, I'm obviously managing and overseeing that portfolio to rotate the capital to where the opportunities are.
Welcome to an Encore podcast presentation from Forbes Books at ForbesBooks.com.
We're here at the Gaining the Edge Hedge Fund Conference in New York City, sponsored by Agecroft Partners here at agecroftpartners.com. And I'm with Sona Menon. She's the head of North America pension practice for Cambridge Associates. They're at cambridgeassociates.com. Sona, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. What brings you to the Hedge Fund Summit?
As an investor in hedge funds, I'm always interested in meeting new hedge funds and understanding what hedge fund investors are thinking and hearing about the latest trends in the space.
Is this a conference that you come to regularly?
No, actually, it's my first time. It is not the first time for my organization to attend, but it's my first time.
And you're the head of North America pension practice. What is happening in the world of hedge funds and investing that you wish more people understood?
Well, I'll tell you that we in the pension investment world are large users of hedge funds.
Yes.
And hedge funds can play a very important role in a pension plan in reducing the risk embedded in the portfolio. And in a world where interest rates are really, really low, where organizations, plan sponsors still need a lot of growth, sometimes the hedging part of the portfolio will certainly help you, but it won't get you there all the way.
Yes.
And hedge funds can play a very important role because they give you some downside protection when you need it, and then they can give you a little bit of upside that bonds can't give right now.
And tell us a little bit about your firm, Cambridge Associates.
Cambridge Associates is a global investment firm. We build portfolios for large institutional investors. We have 3 practice areas broadly. We serve pension clients as one, endowments and foundations as another, and private clients.
And you're located in Boston. Does that mean that many of you, yourself and many of your colleagues, were also educated in the Boston area as well?
We're a global investment firm. The headquarters is in Boston,
Yes.
but we have 8 offices. We have several offices in the U.S., but also in London, in Beijing, Singapore, etc. So we have colleagues from all over the world. However, Boston is our head office.
Yes, and what is your background? How did you come to Cambridge Associates?
Actually, I just celebrated my 18th year at Cambridge Associates.
Congratulations.
Yes, it's been a fantastic run. I've spent most of that time in Boston, but spent 3 of those years in London. Prior to Cambridge, I was at the Harvard Business School getting an MBA. Prior to that, I was at JP Morgan for 4 years in sales and trading.
In New York?
Yes, in New York. Also, I spent a couple of years at JP Morgan doing sovereign risk research. I graduated from Cornell University with a bachelor's in international relations. I sort of tripped upon the world of investments, and I'm glad I did.
When you say tripped upon it, does that mean you were in college with some other goal or no goal, and you found this and realized it was a great direction for you to move?
Well, it seemed, I think, that I had evolving goals. I thought
like
I might...
many of us.
Yes, like many of us. But what I realized is that I love markets. I love a fast-paced work environment. I love working in a place where you work with a lot of colleagues and learn from each other. And working at that time in JP Morgan in a highly competitive training program was a great way to start my career.
Off mic, you mentioned to me that when you go to conferences, you're often a speaker.
Yes.
And at this conference, you're not a speaker, and you're sort of enjoying the, well, there's some responsibility and even perhaps stress associated with speaking, right? I'm curious to know, when you're at other conferences and speaking, what are the kinds of things you're talking about?
I'm often invited to speak at a conference in my role as an outsourced CIO. So we talked a little bit about how I was the head of our pensions practice in North America. But what I've been doing for many, many, many more years than that, ever since I've really been at Cambridge Associates, but definitely in the last dozen years, is I serve as an outsourced chief investment officer for pension plans and endowment plans. And in that respect, I am an asset allocator. I determine which assets to invest for a given portfolio depending on what their needs are, and then I identify the specific investments within each asset class to invest in. And over time, I'm obviously managing and overseeing that portfolio to rotate the capital to where the opportunities are. So in that capacity as an outsourced CIO, I'm often invited to conferences to speak about what my view of the world is, where I'm investing my portfolios, where are the opportunities, where are the risks, how do we think about diversity also, and how do we think about diverse managers. A lot of topics that are topical, but then others that have been of strategic interest.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here and ask a question that may be a bad question. And if it is, you'll tell me. But it seems to me that if you're an outsourced CIO, and I'm assuming you're serving in that capacity for multiple clients at one time, it seems to me that actually gives you an advantage, because instead of being an internal CIO with a very focused perspective of the world, this is probably broadening your view because you're looking at the world from a handful or a variety of companies' points of view.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You nailed it. I think it is great for me to be able to sit in a seat where I'm able to think about multiple portfolios. There's a lot of things that are common, and there are a lot of things that are different. And over time, as you do this, you see the trends developing.
Yes. And
that's also in part why I'm often asked to speak on a panel, because I have the benefit of more than one portfolio. And I also have the benefit of more than one set of problems.
Well, and more than one, I'm going to say industry, but focus. I mean, each portfolio, each client is going to have, there's going to be some differentiators between them. And so you're going to have to assimilate that as well in the work you're doing for them.
Absolutely. The context of the client is actually the most important. I mean,
Yes.
I work with a number of healthcare clients. They have their own issues, each of them distinct. I work with public pension plans. I work with corporate pension plans, and thinking about their portfolio and investment strategy in context of their organization is probably one of the most critical parts of the success.
Is the idea of having an outsourced CIO, is that a fairly new idea, or has that existed for a long time?
The Cambridge Associates has been in the outsourced CIO business for over 15 years.
Okay.
It's become probably much more commonplace in the last at least 5 to 7 years.
Okay.
So it's been around, but I would say that a couple things. Outsourced CIO means a lot of different things, so people really experience that word in different ways. Mm-hmm. And there are also different models of how outsourced CIO is delivered by different organizations. So there's a lot still to learn, but I would say it's becoming increasingly popular.
Is it something that Cambridge has specialized in, or that others inside the industry think of Cambridge as specializing in?
I would say increasingly so. Maybe it wasn't the case that we were a household name in the outsourced CIO space 5 years ago, but we certainly are now.
Yeah, something you've really embraced, and
Yes.
it's a practice that you're growing.
Yes.
So I want to ask one last question. I'm talking with Sona Menon. She's the head of North America pension practice, and as we've been talking about, also an outsourced CIO. Her company is Cambridge Associates at cambridgeassociates.com. You know, we talked a little bit about your college experience and how you came to be part of this industry. I'm wondering, when you meet with young people today who are thinking about the industry, what kind of advice do you give them to help steer them towards a successful career?
Oh, thank you for asking me that question. Actually, you asked me earlier why people ask me to speak at conferences. It's really two reasons. One is my investment role, but the second, as someone who's been in the profession for over 20 years, is to give career advice, and it's particularly to women in the investment space. I would argue we could always use more women in this space. But in terms of just general career advice, I would say that really it's very, very important to take risks earlier on. I think that when you graduate from college, I think the idea is to, go somewhere, feel safe, etc. But
you mean there's a tendency to look for safety?
Yes,
okay.
a tendency to look for safety. At least that's what I've experienced with people I've spoken to. But I think it's really important to try something, and not liking something that you do has equal value to learning what you do like. That's one thing. And two is really spend time developing and nourishing your relationships. I think that when you're young in your 20s and your 30s, you're very focused on developing your skills. That's very important. Continue to do that. But I think alongside that, developing relationships is great, because as you go and you meet people and talk to people, you never know there's a mentor around the corner. There's someone there who can teach you, and you can learn from their mistakes. And I wish I had done a little bit more of that in my career, but I tell the young folks that I meet that if you do that, sometimes you learn more from that than you can from just your own job.
Yes. And I do want to drill in just for a moment into what you said about risk and failure, because I remember when I was young, a failure could be crushing. Had I heard your advice, I might have thought to myself, oh, that failure is actually something for me to embrace and learn from, instead of hiding my head in the sand from it. And that's really what you're suggesting, is go for it and be prepared to learn from it, and perhaps don't even be surprised by your failure. Be willing to accept the failure before you even start.
Absolutely. I think it becomes a phenomenal way to learn. I think you learn more from failures than from successes, quite frankly. Having had a couple, I know that.
Me too.
and I think that it is very scary. And I think a young person needs an older person who's more experienced to say, hey, it's okay.
Yes.
And then I think it makes it better.
Well, and also when you're young, you tend to have less to lose by failing, right?
Absolutely.
So that's another great reason to fail, is because the cost is pretty small.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. Her name is Sona Menon. She's the head of North America pension practice for Cambridge Associates. She's also an outsourced CIO. The company Cambridge Associates is at cambridgeassociates.com. Sona, thank you so much for joining us.
Many thanks.
Thank you for listening to this Encore podcast presentation from Forbes Books at forbesbooks.com.